My brother used to say I'd end up living in his basement like it was a weather forecast. Cloudy with a chance of Sam on my futon. He'd smirk, clinking a beer against the steel support post like it was a bell I was destined to ring. He said it so often the words started to feel less like a jab and more like a family proverb, something you'd embroider on a pillow if you ran out of Bible verses. Back then, his basement was a whole personality. Cole's Cave. A neon sign from a defunct bowling alley buzzed above the dartboard. The walls were painted the kind of gray that hardware stores call storm. And for some reason, he kept a set of dumbbells no one ever used. The place smelled like detergent and fresh egos. He'd host poker nights where I was the charity seat. Someone had to lose with grace. And when I grabbed a soda from the mini fridge, he'd nod at the stairs and say, "Good training, little brother. Get comfortable." It wasn't just the basement. It was the chorus of tiny verdicts. "You're too nice. You think too much. You always take the scenic route to the wrong place." He had a way of saying these things with a grin that invited everyone else to laugh, like he'd sprinkled sugar on a lemon and called it dessert. People laughed. I laughed too, because if you don't laugh, you're the person who can't take a joke, and somehow that label sticks worse than anything else. If you asked our parents, Cole was the blueprint and I was the draft. He had a tidy marketing job at a company that made things even I bought: coolers, tumblers, a beach chair with a built-in speaker. He had a real mortgage before I had a real couch. I drifted between part-time gigs and full-time worry, installing shelves for neighbors, selling reclaimed wood, cutting boards at flea markets, painting trim in old houses that sighed when I opened their doors. Nights, I watched videos about bookkeeping until numbers started behaving. I learned to quote jobs without apologizing. I saved receipts in an accordion folder labeled with sticky notes that kept peeling off. It wasn't glamorous, but I liked the feeling of seeing my own fingerprints on finished work. The joke followed me anyway. At Mom's 61st, Cole lifted his glass and said, "To Sam, the only person I know who could get lost in a cul-de-sac. If you ever need a place to crash, you know I've got that basement." The room rippled with polite chuckles. Mom frowned and then smoothed it away, the way she does. I swallowed ginger ale and tried to imagine a future where I didn't make the air hum with awkwardness. Funny how certain seasons crack you open. The year after, Mom slipped on the ice and broke her hip. Hospitals fracture time. Everything becomes fluorescent and slow. I started handling her paperwork because I was the only one who had patience for the whole music. While she healed, I made soup and shoved the coffee table out of the way so she could practice with her walker. Cole came by when he could, bringing bakery cookies and pep talks, like a visiting dignitary. He meant well. He always has, in his way. But in the quiet hours, it was me and Mom and the thin, brave sound of rubber tips sliding across the rug. Something else happened during those months. My little one-man handyman hustle stopped being a hustle and became a business. A contractor I'd helped with a deck recommended me to a realtor, who recommended me to 3 more, and suddenly I had a rotation. Patch, paint, replace a cracked tile, fix a sticky sliding door before an open house. I bought a used van that smelled like pine cleaner and hope. I learned to schedule, to say no, to send estimates that didn't apologize for existing. The accordion folder became cloud storage and my sticky notes, digitally, stuck. I didn't tell Cole much. Not out of spite. Out of self-preservation. Every time I tried to share a good thing, it somehow became a lesson in how good things can fall apart. He's a storyteller too, just with different endings. "Be careful," he'd say. "One bad review and those realtors will ghost you. You're underpricing yourself. You're overpricing yourself. You should hire. You should stay lean." The advice contradicted itself so perfectly it could have been a mirror maze. I learned to thank him and then make my own choices quietly. Years stack up even when you're not looking. 10 of them did. By the time the calendar said so, my van had a new logo on the side, my name in clean block letters, and a small hammer that looked more friendly than fierce. I had 3 part-time guys who could caulk a tub straight enough that you wouldn't notice the line while brushing your teeth. I had weekends again, some of them. I had a savings account with numbers that felt like they belonged to an adult. I had a rented shop with a rolling door and a radio that only played 2 stations, one country, one whatever the DJ was in the mood for. Then, on a rainy Tuesday, my doorbell startled me. It wasn't the weather. It was the rhythm. 2 quick, 1 slow, the same pattern Cole and I used as kids when we invented spy missions to the kitchen after bedtime. I wiped my hands on a rag and opened the door. He looked wrung out. Not sick, not broken, just softer in places that used to be sharp. His blue dress shirt wasn't tucked all the way in, and there was a hollow in his voice when he said my name. Sam. We did the brother dance, shoulder tap, half hug, a joke about the rain pretending not to notice the years between us. I made coffee. He cupped the mug like it was a tiny campfire. Silence kept trying to settle. We kept chewing it with small talk. I had to remind myself that sometimes silence is just honesty in comfortable clothes. Finally, he took a breath that sounded like a zipper. I got laid off, he said. 3 words, a whole season. The merger, he added, like that explained how a table disappears from under your plate. And things are tight. Tighter than I thought they'd be. He met my eyes the way people look at a mirror when they're trying to recognize their own face. I need a loan. There it was, the line snapping taut. Every basement joke scrolled across the table like a ticker. I saw the neon bowling sign, the poker chips, the rehearsal dinners where he raised his glass, and I lowered mine. I saw Mom's walker on the rug in my van under a flickering streetlight. Early Mondays when coffee tasted like courage. I don't want to ask, he said, and for once I believed him. He wasn't selling charm. He wasn't selling anything. I wrapped my hands around my mug to keep them from shaking. Not fear. Gravity. The kind that finally notices you and presses down. Okay, I said, and my voice surprised me with how steady it sounded. Tell me what you need. I asked him what he needed, and he named a number that made my chest tighten. Not because it was impossible. I could cover it. Barely. But because it was him asking. My brother, who once taped a cardboard sign to his basement door that said Future Sam's apartment, like it was already a done deal. The way he said the amount was different, though. No smirk, no joke hanging at the edges. Just tired math. A man with a mortgage, a family, and a pile of bills he couldn't shuffle anymore. How soon? I asked. Soon as you can, he said. He kept his eyes on the coffee, not me. I should have been angry, but what I felt first was this strange ache, like watching a lion limp across a field. My brother had been larger than life, untouchable. To see him here, shoulders bent, was disorienting. I'll help, I said, then let the pause breathe a little. But not for free. His head snapped up. What do you mean, not for free? I mean interest. And a contract. You remember all those years you told me I'd end up in your basement? He winced. Sam, come on. That was just a joke, I know. My voice was calm, steadier than I expected. But I remember everyone. Every poker night toast. Every family dinner jab. Every time you made it clear you thought I'd never stand on my own. He rubbed the back of his neck. I didn't mean it like that. Maybe not. But you meant it enough to say it. The silence thickened. Rain kept sliding down the window, steady as a metronome. Finally, I pulled a notebook from the drawer and set it on the table. Here's how this works. I'll write down the amount. We'll agree on an interest rate. We'll set a timeline. You'll sign. I'll sign. And every payment you make, you'll be reminded, gently, that the basement never became my address. He gave this short, humorless laugh. You're really going to make this about old jokes? No, I said. I'm making this about dignity. Mine. The one you kept undercutting for years. This isn't punishment, Cole. This is a ledger. He stared at me a long time, then leaned back in his chair like gravity had doubled. For once, he didn't have a comeback ready. Just a man sitting across from his younger brother, realizing the scoreboard had flipped. I wrote the terms in careful handwriting. Nothing cruel, nothing that would break him. Just enough to remind him I wasn't the same draft version he used to laugh about. I slid the notebook across the table. Read it, I said. He did. His jaw tightened at the interest rate. His lips pressed into a line at the payment schedule. Then he sighed, long and heavy, and picked up the pen. You're enjoying this, aren't you? He muttered. I shook my head. I'm remembering it. The pen scratched against the paper. The contract was signed. And in that moment, something shifted, not just between us, but in me. For the first time, I wasn't the kid in his shadow. I was the man who could decide whether he stayed in the light. Cole slid the signed page back toward me, but his hand lingered on it, like maybe if he held on long enough, the deal wouldn't count. I tucked the paper into a folder and placed it neatly on the counter. There, I said. Official. He chuckled once, but it wasn't humor. It was disbelief, maybe even shame. You know, if Dad were here, he'd be laughing his head off. His boys doing business at the kitchen table. Maybe, I said. Or maybe he'd be glad we finally started treating each other like equals. That landed heavier than I expected. Cole rubbed his forehead and stared at the steam rising from his coffee. For the first time in our lives, he looked older than me. We talked logistics after that, where to transfer the money, how to set reminders. It was practical, businesslike, no different than what I'd do with a client. But under the numbers was something rawer. I could see it in the way he wouldn't quite meet my eyes, the way he fidgeted with his wedding band. Before he left, he stood by the door, hand on the knob, and finally asked, "Do you hate me?" It caught me off guard. "No," I said honestly. "I just don't forget." He nodded, slow and quiet, then stepped into the rain. The payments came, month after month. Sometimes early, sometimes late, always with a note in the memo line. For the basement jokes. For poker night. For Mom's birthday toast. Little acknowledgments that both stung and healed. It wasn't about the money anymore. It was about the balance sheet of our history finally evening out. At Christmas, Mom asked us to take a photo together. Cole threw an arm around my shoulders. For once, it didn't feel like a weight. Later that night, as we stood by the tree, he murmured, "Guess you never did need my basement, huh?" I smiled. "Nope. Turns out I built my own house." And the best part? This time, he didn't laugh at that. He just nodded. Because finally, he understood.